Climate-focused pratikraman, a guided meditation. This is a guided meditation that incorporates the reflective and educational aspects of the Jain ritual called pratikraman. Pratikraman is a practice of purification performed periodically, daily, weekly, or at a minimum during the time of purification traditionally followed by Jains in India and elsewhere. Pratikraman is a practice of introspection. The word has connotations of coming together from all directions, and it involves an element of repentance. Repentance can bring up negative emotions and feelings of cognitive dissonance. This practice requires us to be in equanimity. In addition to the potential negative emotions, there's also an affirming element, an alignment with our highest values. And we give ourselves space to forgive ourselves and to forgive others. Ultimately, we have the goal of healing. And in this practice, we multiply our individual and collective goodness. As we care for our spirits, we also care for all. We will begin by acknowledging our immense respect for our teachers and tradition by singing the Namaskar Sutra or Navgar Mahamantra. Om Namo Arihantanam, Om Namo Siddhanam, Om Namo Ayaryanam, Om Namo Uvajayanam. Namo Loe Savasahunam. Eso Panchanamo Karo Savapava Panasano Mangalanancha Savesim Padamam Have Mangalam. We'll open the Pratikaman with the story of the elephant Meru Prabha. The story starts in this being's life as a monk, as a human being who had decided to become a monk after having experienced a very luxurious life as a prince. Practicing in the community involved discomfort, so much so that he confessed to Lord Mahavir, the teacher, the 24th teacher in our tradition, that he did not think he could withstand these disciplines. And Bhagwan Mahavir reminded him of the story of his past life, which is what we'll discuss now, the story of the elephant. In this story, a forest fire raged all around the animals who were frightened and panicked. They did not know where to go. The animals were gathered in the center as deep as they could go to escape the fire encircling them. And in that crowd, a rabbit sought shelter under the raised leg of Meruprabha, who had just raised his leg to scratch an itch. In his compassion for the rabbit, Meruprabha kept his leg raised many days and nights as the fire went on and on until it finally subsided. The other animals scampered to safety. On the right panel, you'll see that Meruprabha, exhausted, collapsed, and after several painful days, he eventually died. The compassion he felt as an elephant led to his precious human birth. There are so many lessons that can be learned from this story. But as we open up this climate-focused Pratikaman, two questions to consider are the following. Are we willing to tolerate discomfort to save others? And can we help to prevent the fire? Jainism, environmentalism, and the climate crisis. In 1990, Indian former High Commissioner to the UK and Member of Parliament L.M. Singhvi wrote the Jain Declaration on Nature, which outlined the fundamental teachings of the Jain religion and their inextricable connection to the preservation of nature. As he said, Jainism is a religion of ecology and has turned ecology into a religion. Now, in 2021, there is an urgent need for action on the climate crisis, and we as a community can reflect on how our values can motivate us to act on behalf of all living beings. Our philosophies and codes of conduct, which we call vrats or vows, provide solutions to address our current crisis of global heating and extreme weather events, including fires, floods, droughts, hurricanes, and other catastrophes. Asteya is one of the relevant anuvrats. Non-stealing, the principle of not taking what belongs to another. Ahimsa, aparigraha, and asteya are three of the most important vrats that are relevant to the climate crisis. Ahimsa is more than not doing violence. It is more than an attitude. It is a whole way of life. All Jains must avoid himsa as much as possible and observe only necessary and unavoidable himsa. When feasible, we must find alternatives to these activities. It is the duty of every individual to refrain from himsa and take daily stock of himsa-related activities. That is what pratikraman done daily, weekly, monthly, or yearly is all about. In this ritual, we reflect on and repent any himsa done mentally, verbally, or physically, directly or indirectly, knowingly or unknowingly, intentionally or unintentionally, by ourselves, with others, or by acting through others, by condoning or providing support to others in any way. One example of limiting our himsa is by practicing veganism, which limits our violence to 5 sense beings, called panchindriya, and as well, it forms part of our environmental care, which affects all life down to 1 sense beings, or ikindriya. 5 sense beings are animals, like cows and chickens. 1 sense beings are plants, and in between are many other types of organisms. They are all living and all feel pain. Aparigraha limits one's consumption and material possessions, and this limitation benefits the earth and all beings. And asteya, as we discussed in the last slide, which has to do with refraining from stealing, benefits our planet, other beings, and future generations. The ancient Jain teaching of Parasparo Bagraho Jivanam corresponds to our modern concept of the ethics of care and the Buddhist concept of interbeing. Human, animal, and environmental health can also be considered one health, another modern concept. The ancient meanings are that all life is bound together. All lives are interdependent. We know that we all depend on air, food, water, and shelter to sustain ourselves, and climate change affects the social and environmental determinants of health. Air pollution, increased allergic and asthma symptoms, decreased food security, changes in the geographic distribution of mosquitoes, increasing risks of diseases of malaria, West Nile, dengue, and Zika, mental distress are all health consequences caused or exacerbated by climate change. Climate is linked to livability and disease risks with direct and indirect effects, and it is poor communities and vulnerable parts of the ecosystem, vulnerable living beings that are most affected. The effect of the climate crisis on all beings is to cause us sorrow. And for us to address this, let us turn to our true intentions of care. And in the Jain tradition, this is most clearly articulated in the value of ahimsa. There are 2 sutras that I will read here to ground us in our teachings. Ahimsa paramo dharmas tatha, ahimso paro damaha, ahimsa paramam danam, ahimsa paramo tapaha. Reverence for life is the supreme religious teaching. Non-injury to life is the supreme moral guidance. Giving freedom from fear to life is the supreme act of giving. Non-violence to life is the supreme renunciation. Nati anudo appam, ayasado anunyanam nati, jahataha jana mahalam, arnavasam ahimsamam atti. There is nothing so small and subtle as the atom, nor any element so vast as space. In the same way, there is no quality of soul more subtle than ahimsa, harmlessness, and no virtue of spirit greater than reverence for all life. The burning of massive quantities of fossil fuels to build and run modern society has increased the concentrations of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. The carbon dioxide molecules in the atmosphere trap energy from the sun. Since approximately 1900, the average temperature of the Earth's surface has increased by 1 degree Celsius due to warming by greenhouse gases. There's an overwhelming 99% consensus position of climate scientists that human activities are the main cause of global warming, primarily through the burning of fossil fuels and use of animal agriculture. We must act quickly so as to avert irreversible damage. Higher temperatures have wreaked havoc on the ability of plants and animals to survive in environments that are changing faster than individuals and species can adapt. We are in the middle of the sixth great extinction, characterized by the loss of between 17,000 and 100,000 species each year. And it's estimated that half of all plants, animals, and birds on the planet will die off before 2100. This is a grave situation in our planetary history. Thousands of humans die every year due to hotter conditions and from extreme heat events. Between 2030 and 2050, climate change is expected to cause approximately 250,000 additional deaths per year from malnutrition, malaria, diarrhea, and heat stress, as climate change changes the geographic distribution of mosquitoes and increases diseases that are carried by them. Most of the extra carbon dioxide and heat has been absorbed by the oceans, creating stress and dangerous living conditions for marine life. With sea levels rising due to melting glaciers and hotter ocean temperatures, low-lying areas are flooding. Warmer ocean temperatures are causing hurricanes to become ever more destructive. Monsoon rains are adding to the stress in the environment. Dry areas are getting even drier. Forests are getting drier and wildfires are becoming increasingly more destructive. For example, in California, where I live, we have had water shortage and some of the worst wildfires to date. Let's now consider actions we can take to address climate change, including tradition and going beyond it. Well, in Jainism, we are responsible for both direct and indirect violence, unintentional as well as intentional, and we do have to face the karmic consequences. In the Pratikraman Sutra, we recognize many forms of violence and name them. We consider our intentions, impact, and responsibilities. Climate change, occurring in the context of our modern world with its global economy, offers us the opportunity to recognize forms of indirect and unintentional violence and to apply our intentions and vows in new ways. Traditionally, as Jains, we refrain from eating meat and killing beings like mosquitoes in our homes. There are new forms of violence in modern times. Although traditionally we are vegetarian and have avoided eating eggs, the modern factory farming practices and even smaller scale animal farming practices result in great violence to dairy cows and egg-laying hens. We've been talking a bit about climate change, and there's also plastic pollution, which may not be directly associated, but also contribute to environmental degradation. So, we have to think about this scale of how this is all happening. Governments and business institutions acting under national and corporate interests collectively enable hundreds of millions of humans to cooperate with each other to commit unimaginable levels of violence. But because of the scale and complexity of these institutions, we may not recognize or feel responsibility for the violence enabled by our own actions. A person living by principles of nonviolence and care would never directly participate in wiping out an entire forest, starving the animals, displacing indigenous people, and poisoning the environment. But the same individuals may not be aware that his or her dietary choices, choice of work, their taxes, consumer spending, investments may be enabling exactly such violence. Our food is grown away far away in massive industrial farms and transported from long distances by people we never meet in environments we never interact with. Our advanced technology and institutions allow us to distance ourselves almost entirely from the acquisition of necessities of life. We're disconnected from the natural world, our actions, and even from each other. Our water, electricity, fuel, clothes, medicines, and other necessities of life are provided through complex processes from which we are largely disconnected except as consumers. In this state of affairs, we can feel powerless, and yet we need not. The Jain Dashvekalik Sutra provides a question to address what we should do in our daily lives and by extension, to address climate change, and an answer which goes grounded in tradition but beyond it. Gaham chare, gaham chitte, gaham ase, gaham sae, gaham punjanto pashanto, bhavam kammam na bandhai. How shall I walk? In what manner shall I stand? How ought I sit? In what way shall I sleep? In what attitude shall I speak and eat, so that I stop creating cycles of karmic bondage for myself? The answer? Jayam Jare, Jayam Chitte, Jayam Ase, Jayam Sae, Jayam Bhunjanto Pashanto Bhavam Kamam Na Bandhai. When you walk, walk with awareness. When you stand, be mindful that you are standing. When you sit, know what you are doing. When you sleep, remain aware. When you speak and eat, do not commit any harm to any living being. In this way, you will stop inviting painful consequences and will no longer create cycles of karmic bondage for yourself. The Jain principle of ahimsa naturally makes Jainism a religion of environmental protection. Our moral baseline is to practice vegetarianism. Considering the harm that results from dairy farming to cows who are forcibly impregnated, separated from their newborn calves, and eventually slaughtered when no longer deemed productive, Jains are increasingly going beyond vegetarianism to eliminate dairy products and adopt completely vegan diets. We can see that even in the 2009 World Watch Institute report on livestock, the total greenhouse gases attributable to livestock products amounts to over 50%. This is a grave contribution to climate change. When we compare sample diet footprints in tons of carbon dioxide equivalents per capita, we can see that our individual dietary choices matter and that the meat lovers' dietary footprint is much larger than that of the vegans, with many other choices in between. You can see the relative contribution of various kinds of foods here. This slide also depicts individual foods, and you can see that the carbon footprint of many foods of animal origin, including cheese, are very high. Some of the foods of vegetable origin are lower. Now, also included here is foods that are high in water, which will have a lower carbon footprint than those that are more concentrated. Emissions from dairy are considerable. We emphasize the contribution of dairy for the Jain community because we are already vegetarian, but traditionally milk is part of the diet. And we can see here the tremendous impact that this has. In the US, there's 278 million dairy cows. 144 gallons of water are used to produce 1 gallon of milk, and more than 93% of that water is used to grow feed. 9% is the amount of US cropland used to grow feed crops for dairy cows, 34.1 million acres. Project Drawdown, a seminal book discussing the levers that we can pull to decrease the climate crisis, describes plant-rich diet as the number 4 solution right after reducing food waste, so we can see how much our food choices matter in addressing this crisis. As important as it is to understand what we can do, it's also important to consider how we can lead by example and advocacy. It is difficult to change the diet and the agricultural system globally. And one way is to lead by example and kind advocacy, showing the world that a healthy diet for all, including humans, animals, plants, the planet, is critical to reduce global warming. Veganism is important. Dairy means suffering, rape, and death for cows. Cheese has the third highest carbon footprint. Advocating with love, which in our Jain and Buddhist literature is described in particular terms of maitri, loving kindness, karuna, compassion, pramoda, friendliness, friendship, and madhyastha, equanimity. These qualities are important for us so that we embody peace just as we choose to spread it. The Jain Declaration on the Climate Crisis was adopted in October 2019, and now we'll turn to specific reflections on our actions and commitments based on this declaration. As an individual, have I done the following? What can I commit to? Consider these reflections. Slow down and stop if you would like as you listen. I'm going to read these using the pronoun I, and you can take this on if you choose. Have I used a carbon footprint calculator to understand and reduce my negative impact on the environment? For example, one that's at terrapass.org or conservation.org. Can I commit to abstaining from meat, eggs, and dairy products, thereby minimizing the use of water and avoiding toxic animal waste and methane production? Can I commit to minimizing food, water, paper, and other material waste in my home? How about relying less on car ownership? When possible, walking, biking, car sharing, carpooling, and maximizing the use of public transportation. And if I must drive, can I commit to using a hybrid or fully electric vehicle, or at least choose a very efficient fossil fuel car and reduce carbon emitting road trips? Can I reduce air travel and avoid cruise vacations? How about living in a home that is as small as possible, using energy-saving technologies and renewable energy sources such as solar? And can I buy and own fewer material goods, refusing what I don't need, reducing what I use, donating what others can use, recycling what material could be used again, and disposing of the little trash that I generate in a way that minimally hurts other living beings? And the picture that's shown on this slide shows little characters that exemplify what we often hear in environmental circles as good things to do: reducing, reusing, recycling. But something that's not that hard for Jains in our culture to do is also refuse. We are a religion and culture that knows about renunciation and not taking something that we know to cause harm. So let's consider as individuals what we can do in that regard. As an individual, can I commit to practicing right livelihood to ensure that my work or business can benefit the climate for all living beings? If I've been fortunate enough to have time and money to volunteer, have I used it, or can I commit to use it to help an organization focused on environmental justice? If I've been fortunate enough to have money to invest, have I ensured that the companies that I support are helping and not harming the climate, working people, and other living beings? Can I commit to do so? A reflection for us to consider, given our place as lay people in a community that also includes nuns and monks, is, as lay people, can we move towards the simplicity of the lifestyle of sadhvi and sadhu, Aryika, Digambar monk, to choose least harm. Next, these reflections focus on what an individual can do to encourage the community to do other actions at a community level. And in traditional pratikraman format, we think about whether I have done this in the past, have I encouraged my community to do the following, and also in the future, can I commit to do so? So have I continued to educate ourselves and our children about the climate crisis in our temples and communities and in our schools and workplaces? Have I encouraged my community to improve the overall education of girls, which directly increases their ability to make wise choices in the future regarding family planning? Can I commit to do so locally and perhaps globally, as in India, where we have cultural connection? Have I encouraged my community to locate places of worship and meetings close to public transportation and facilitate carpools? Can I commit to do so? Have I encouraged my community to use energy-saving technologies and renewable energies such as electricity rather than natural gas for cooking, and use of solar energy to power our temples? Can I commit to do so? The Jain Center of Northern California was an early adopter of solar technology. Here there are some solar panels that line the roof of the parking structure, which provides a source of energy for the Jain Center. Just down the road from some of our famous dirts, Jain dirts in Mount Abu and Ranakpur, there is another tradition, the Brahma Kumaris, that actually has the India One solar thermal power plant. They have installed this technology with the statement that the current environment crisis is a clear call to transform our awareness and lifestyle. So there's examples in India as well as the US of communities that have taken action to address the climate crisis. Have I encouraged my community to do the following? Minimize food and water waste. Can I commit to do so? Have I encouraged my community to serve only vegan food and use only vegan items in rituals such as artis and pujas, such as almond or coconut oil in place of ghee, and using soy, almond, or other plant-based milk in place of cow's milk? Can I commit to do so? Have I encouraged my community to eliminate the use of polystyrene and single-use plastics in the serving of food, to use reusable plates and cutlery where possible, like our traditional thalis, and otherwise use compostable or biodegradable products only to minimize waste in our landfills? Can I commit to do so? Finally, on the largest level, as a global citizen, have I done the following, and can I commit to do so? Have I supported governments, businesses, and other organizations to prioritize ahimsa and the practice of ahimsa in various forms as more important than short-term profit? For example, encouraging beneficial and regenerative agriculture and technology, and decreasing or eliminating subsidies, banning harmful products like plastic and chemical pesticides, and removing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere with reforestation, and at the minimum, to stop cutting trees. Can I join global voices to encourage policy shifts so that it's easier for everyone to make good choices? As a closing for our pratikraman, having reflected on all of these actions and taking some time to make commitments, let's recite forgiveness and a blessing. Kamemi savve jiva kamantu me, metti me savve bhuyesu, veram majjam na kanaye. Savve jiva kama vasa chodaha raja bhamanta, te me savve kame via majja viteha kamanta. I forgive all living beings. May all beings be willing to forgive me. I am a friend to all life, with no ill will toward anyone. All living beings, including myself, are suffering and reincarnating throughout the whole universe because of clinging to conditions and habits, the push and pull of karmas. Through mutual forgiveness, we can bring an end to our suffering. So again, I declare that I forgive everyone, and may everyone forgive me. And the blessing? Sarve bhavantu sukhina, sarve shantu niramaya, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kashit dukhabhag bhavet. May all living beings know real happiness and the source of happiness within. May all living beings become free from delusion, disharmony, and disease. May all perceive the true, the good, and the beautiful with clarity of mind and purity of perception. May no one, not even the tiniest of creatures, become a victim or cause of pain, suffering, torture, or killing. May everyone revere the sanctity of life.